comes from Matthew 13, 1 through 9. The parable of the sower and the soils. That day Jesus went out of the house and sat down beside the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he climbed into a boat and sat down. The whole crowd was standing on the shore. He said many things to them in parables. A farmer went out to scatter seed. As he was scattering seed, some fell on the path, and birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where the soil was shallow. They sprouted immediately because the soil wasn't deep. But when the sun came up, it scorched the plants, and they dried up because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorny plants. The thorny plants grew and choked them. Other seed fell on good soil and bore fruit. In one case, a yield of 100 to 1. In another case, a yield of 60 to 1. In another case, a yield of 30 to 1. Everyone who has ears should pay attention.
When Jesus was traveling around Galilee, talking to crowds, times were tough for the peasants. Not far, only 4 miles from where Jesus lived as a boy, is the city of Sower. And it is a city that is filled with, well, it must have looked like a Roman city at the time, because there are villas, there are very well-to-do people lived there. In fact, on the floor of one of the villas, they have uncovered a mosaic. This is around the three-sided table, and the mosaic is panels, maybe like a comic strip or cartoon. It tells the story of Hercules and Bacchus having a drinking contest. Now, if you remember, Bacchus is the god of wine, so it's pretty obvious that Hercules didn't do so well. It's also pretty obvious that the people who lived here, they may have been Jewish, but they were not actively involved. I never mentioned Sepphoris in the New Testament. Jesus didn't go there. It was just the wrong place. Where he did go was around Lake Galilee. And around the shoreline of Lake Galilee, there are all these coves, these little indentations, semicircles, maybe 50, 100 yards across. And that was where he was at. All these people were being displaced by the rich. They were buying up the peasants' farms, putting them together in plantations, and then hiring the peasants as needed, as day laborers. They were broke and they were unemployed for much of the year, which is why there were so many people there. If they'd had jobs, they'd been busy. But they had time to go visit, to listen to Jesus. So they crowded around this cove and pushed Jesus back so much that he had to get into a boat and move out into the water. And that was a good thing, because he could feel the wind coming out of the east across the lake, picking up his voice and carrying it up to the amphitheater of thousands of people there who could hear him clearly. And he told parables. Parables are stories that are engaging and thought-provoking and imaginative. We hear about a farmer sowing seeds, and we all can imagine what it looked like, what it was. Even though today we sow seeds with a little machine that throws them out, we know what it's about. We understand that. And the people in those days, some of them had done that. And he tells of how this person who's sowing slings the seeds far and wide, broadcasts them every which way. And some of the seed landed on the path, hard-beaten path, bounced maybe, and then birds came and ate it up. I'm sure you see that on the roads after the wheat trucks have come by and dropped a little seed. Some of the seed landed in the shallow soil, the rocky soil, sprung up quickly, but when the sun came out, they died. And some of the seeds landed among the weeds, and they were choked by these thistles. We can almost imagine, in a Disney-esque fashion, what that must have looked like. We know that feeling. We know how it works. That's what our lives look like. Jesus is not talking about agriculture. He's talking about our lives and what God is doing. And we know that hard-packed part of our lives where we've been this way so many times, we don't even realize what we're doing. And God cannot break in. We know the shallow places in our lives, the hey friends, the wave at somebody first and ask questions later, of the small town, of knowing somebody and thinking you know them well, but in fact all you know is what you think you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And boy, do we know the weeds. My, oh my, do we know the weeds. There's weeds of trying to make a living. There's weeds of having to live with somebody who has a different idea about what you should wear in the morning. And various other things. There are the weeds of the worries. Boy, those grow up around us so fast. We just can't imagine how we would get on if we don't spend a lot of time now going over and over all the things that might happen. Now, of all those things, 1,000 things that we worry about, only one's going to happen. But oh, we spend our time on that. And it chokes out the life in the now. A couple weeks ago, my friend was here, and we were sitting up late at night, cussing and discussing all the problems of the world, and it occurred to me, we've been doing this for 40-some years. We did this back in college. We've done it all along. We would get together and we would share our simply stupid ideas on how to solve all the problems of the world. And back 40-some years ago, we were absolutely assured that in the next 40 years or more, we would solve all these problems and we would make the world a better place. But we didn't. We couldn't. The world did not want to hear our silly, stupid answers. And they wouldn't have worked anyway. And as we were sitting there going on, this is almost a ritual we have of going on about how this is wrong and this is bad and those people, I realized what we were doing. There were two things. First of all, we were defining the circle of who we are. And those who are outside that circle, why, they're a bunch of, you fill in the blank. I'm not like those people. But the other thing we were doing, and this was the downside of it, we were spending time just getting grumpier and grumpier and worse off personally. No happiness in that particular moment except just playing this game, which wasn't a very good game. We were stuck in the midst of the weeds and had an awfully hard time finding a way out. Now, as Jesus was telling this parable, I'm sure by the time he got to the weeds, everybody is listening intently because they all know what he's talking about. It's obvious what he's talking about. It's the bad news. And they're waiting for the punchline. They're waiting for the reason for listing all this bad news, and he gives it. Some of the wheat landed in the good tilled soil and produced 100 to 1, or 60 to 1, or 30 to 1. What does wheat make now? What is the ratio between a grain of wheat and the head it produces? Is it 100 to 1? Anybody know? More? Less? Out here it barely produces 3 to 1. Okay. For all of our science and things, 100 to 1 is a remarkable yield. I think Jesus is not teaching us about agricultural economics. He's teaching us about spiritual economics. When the wheat lands in the good tilled soil, it is such a remarkable return on investment. The farmer doesn't have to worry about the wheat that goes on the road, or the wheat that goes in the shallow, rocky soil, or the wheat that goes into the weeds. Because he's getting so much more back from the good tilled earth that those things really don't matter. You hear that? All of our pondering and worrying about hard-packed, overtrod soil, all of our worry about the shallowness of the world, all our worries about worries don't matter in God's economy, because that one seed that lands in the good soil is all that you need. It makes up for all of the others that are lost. I know we try to be scientific, we try to find the problems, we try to find fixes, and that's good. But when it comes to the sowing of the seeds, those other things don't matter. They don't. Good tilled soil. Now there's an important thing here. We try to till our soil. We know some people who don't. They leave it weedy and rocky in their lives. We try. And sometimes we get so involved in tilling the soil, so involved in making the church more acceptable and more accepting, and doing all the things that we do. And we get so busy in the doing, we don't realize we are plowing up the plants that are growing already. And then there are those who are so needy for God and for love that they tilt their heads back like turkeys in a rainstorm. Tilt their heads back, open their mouths, and give it to me, Lord. And the seed never hits the good tilled soil. It takes a balance of being prepared, being thoughtful, Bible study, missions, working on a sermon. I hope listening to a sermon are ways that we till the soil. But I need to ask you, who is the farmer? Anybody? Who is the farmer? God, that's right. And what is this? Huh?
That's always the answer.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's God. But what is the seed? The seed is, come on, God's love. And since you already know that, we can just call it quits now, right? No, there's one more thing. One more thing. God's love is everywhere. God's love falls on the hard places, the shallow places, the weedy places. God's love is ready for you. And all it takes is one grain to land in a place that is ready. And then it will produce 100 to 1, 60 to 1, 30 to 1. It will fall upon your ready soil, your ready soul, and it will die. Even as Jesus dies for you. And then it will rise, green blade, strong stalk, heavy head, and 100 to 1. God's love filling your life. That's what is being sown.